Dr. Jazz.
Hey, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Jazz.
Oh, well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You
Nice to
know,
meet you.
yeah, you too. Finally, I mean, I have you on so many records, so nice to talk to you in person. So, I mean, in person, this, but
Kind of in person.
kind of in person, yeah,
Today's version of in person.
yeah. Actually, it's incredible. I never thought actually before COVID I would do these things. It's just like the only good thing that came out of COVID is like I started doing these talks. So it's like,
Yeah, actually, I've made a lot of new friends this way, so that it's nice.
yeah, yeah. But I'll just jump in and when I emailed you, you said you were going on tour with Maria Schneider, and
Yes.
and I
Yeah, we
checked,
just finished that.
yeah, and I checked my albums of Maria that I have at home, and I think I have like 7 of those, and I think you're on 6 or on
Oh,
5 of them, so almost on every record. And how does your story with Maria begin,
yeah,
actually?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, how does your story with her begin? I mean, when did you guys, how did you start playing with her?
I guess I started playing with her about 30 years ago. Um, she was going to do her first record, and I used to play with a guy named Bob Belden,
Oh,
and
yes, sir.
We had a gig at this club called Visiones in near the Blue Note, around the corner from the Blue Note. And we played a lot together. Bob is a dear friend.
Yeah.
He is no longer with us. He passed away several years ago. But Maria used to come hear that band.
Oh, wow.
And at one point, she's introduced herself, and I didn't even know she was a musician. And then she contacted me by phone and said, "I'm doing a record, and I'd like you to do it." And I said, "Okay, cool." And I couldn't. She wanted to have a rehearsal, and I had a gig in Boston the night before, and her rehearsal was like at 11 in the morning. So I said, "Okay, well, I'm driving," so I drove in from Boston that morning and went straight to the rehearsal studio, knowing nothing about her. Kenny Werner was playing piano, and Ben Monder was playing guitar. Great Rick Margitza and Tim Reese. I don't want to leave any names out, but I'll stop there for now. And it was amazing music. I was like, man, I made the right decision to do this, because it was a record called Evanescence.
Yeah.
And it's just a great record, and it's a gift to play with her. And I played. We didn't really have a lot of gigs because she wasn't that well known yet. And right around the time we recorded that record, I got married to my wife, Marianne. We bought a house upstate New York, like 90 miles from the city. And we kept our apartment, which I'm still in right now, looking at the Empire State Building out the window.
That's beautiful.
And so Maria got a gig at that same club, Visiones, on Monday nights. And it was just starting. And I said, you know what, to be fair to you, I just bought this house, and on Mondays I kind of want to be up there. It's kind of near Woodstock, and it's in the forest. It's kind of a nice quiet place. And so she got Tony Scher to play bass. And then when Tony couldn't make it, he'd ask if I'd sub, and I subbed. And then at one point, maybe after several years, maybe 8 years, she asked if I would come back. And I said, yeah. I felt like I made a bad decision. So now her star was rising, and she did maybe 2 other records, the 2 that I'm not on. And then I've been with her now for, I don't know, about 20 years since then, 18 to 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful.
So,
Like all these records you've done, Data Lords, I think is the last one, right?
yeah, Data Lords was the last one that came out maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's a
It's
beautiful
very
one.
different for her. She has issues with the big data, with invasion on our privacy and musicians losing the rights to their music. So she's actually spoken in front of Congress
Really?
about it. She's very
Wow.
passionate about it. So she walks the walk. She doesn't just complain. She's one of the people who actually does something about it.
Yeah,
Whether things will change, that remains to be seen. But she's passionate about it.
yeah. Did you
So
guys play new
so that's
music
where I
now?
met Maria.
Did you guys? Yeah,
Actually, she does have a couple. She is not. Uh, she's not fast. She labors over a piece of music.
yeah,
I've played with other people where they can write something on a plane. She's not really like that. She's very passionate, and most musicians I know, like you mentioned, well, whatever, people write a piece of music and then they slap a name on it. That really might not have anything to do with the inspiration for the tune.
yeah,
Maria, like her music is what we learned in music is programmatic. It you can visualize the story that the song is about. She's really into
yeah,
birds. She's passionate about birds and this big data thing and artificial intelligence. And that Data Lords record is all about that. It's about big data
yeah.
and is artificial intelligence going to take over the world? But it's 2 CDs. I guess you have it, but the second CD is more in keeping with her past, like beauty and nature and
Yeah.
finding inspiration in the beauty of Earth. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's beautiful.
So to answer your question, yes, on this last tour, I got back about 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, she has about 2 or 3 new tunes that she's now integrating into the music, into the program. So
yeah, fantastic. Looking forward when the new one comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. But I wanted to ask you this, like I think you're like featured on, I don't know, 1,000 albums, or I don't know how many records you're on. Actually, if you ever count.
No.
I'm kidding. No, but like you're in so many, really.
Maybe half that.
But that's a lot, And how do you prepare for a sideman gig? Whether it's Maria's project or whoever's, like Rich Perry or Vic Juris, or like whoever you played with so many guys, or Bob Minzer, or and also with the drummers, you play. I think with every drummer I heard you fit amazingly. Like you make it work. Like
that's good.
I don't know. That's my ears. But like, how do you make these things work, and how do you prepare usually for a session? Let's say and.
Well, actually, being in New York, and I think it's been this way for a long time. Even old Blue Note records, which I am too. It's one of the few things I'm too young for, but those guys would do a rehearsal or two.
Yeah.
I forget, and then they'd record for a couple days. Most of the records I do now, people will. It's the same for everybody. Somebody will send PDFs of the music. And maybe a demo of some sort or a gig. And I always do my homework. I download all the PDFs and I look at everything. And if there's something that's notey that I need to practice, I practice it so that when the session comes, I'm actually like really looking forward to it. I have no trepidation or fear. I'm actually looking forward to those hard parts because I'm usually prepared. So and at this point in my life, I'm happy to say most of the people I play with are my friends. You mentioned Vic, God bless him. I think I maybe played on 15 of his recordings over the years, and we were dear friends, and I miss him every day, you know. You know, Rich Perry, pretty much all the people, Bob Mincer. Bob moved to California, so I don't really see him anymore. You know, he's got a busy life, but you know, I'm lucky to play with my friends, you know, and I do my homework. And as far as drummers go, fortunately, they're always really good drummers, you know.
Oh man, that's
I
like
played a lot with Adam Nuss. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you played like with the cream of the cream, you know.
Well, there's still guys I dream to play with that I haven't played with, but you know, I feel like as a bass player, it's kind of, you know, at least in the time frame that I'm born in and play music in, I feel like, for example, when I do a workshop, and it's people maybe from 18 to 25 or 30 years old, I'll ask them, what is it if a guy hires you, a person hires you, what are they looking for? You know, what do they want you to do? Or why do they hire you?
Yeah.
And then some people say, oh, because you'll play for cheap, or you know, a bunch of good answers, you know, but I always feel like the best answer is because you'll make them sound good.
Yeah.
You know, and I think as a bass player, you know, I'm not super concerned about getting a solo or all that. I really like playing with people and making them sound good, and them making me sound good, and just that give and take, and humanity of playing with somebody. And I think if you go there and I forget, some famous philosopher said good luck is when opportunity meets what is it? Well, oh, and preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
And you know, so I really believe in that. You know, I tell my students that all the time. You know, and whatever preparation means to you, it's different for different people. But as a bass player, you know, I got to play in tune. Like with Maria, if I'm out of tune, the whole band is out of tune.
Sure.
You know, so that's a priority. You know, trying to play in the moment and just take care of business generally. You know.
Yeah. It's like, is that also one of the reasons you know, you've become like a house bass player for Steeplechase? I think on Niels Winters' records, you're like, I think on like 200 records, and
probably. I mean, I know I had my 100th record, maybe.
Oh wow, that's amazing, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how did that story with
Niels?
Niels
just somebody called me to play on one of their records.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, as a bass player, I was very familiar with Steeplechase because Niels Henning, Orsted Pedersen, played on a lot of records. You know, his own, with Kenny Drew, with Tete Montoliu, great Spanish pianist. And I think he even played on maybe a Paul Bley record or two. And so, you know, if you're a bass player, you have to admire Niels Henning, you know. So I had a lot of those records as a kid. And then I forget what the first one was. I don't remember. But I have to say, Niels over the years has become kind of a, and I would like to think, because he knows I'll take care of biz and come in and make, you know, hopefully make the day go smoothly, and musically and creatively, you know. Then I think I can say that. And luckily, he's turned me on to a lot of my idols. You know, Lee Konitz I played with. Played with Paul Bley. I played on maybe 5 records with Paul, and he's, you know, still one of my idols even after playing with him. You know, I just you know, so Niels has been in my corner.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, you know.
Yeah. Speaking of Paul Bley,
and a lot of my friends, whether it's Vic or
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask you about Paul. You know, I think I have 3 records of those, like Notes on Nanette and Speechless and one other one. But like, how was it for you playing with Paul, and how were those sessions like? I mean, he was, you know, he could be notoriously difficult, but also kind. You know what people say. Like I heard both Pauls, but like, how was it like your experience?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I have a little story, and I'll try to
Oh,
say it
please.
quickly. But
Oh,
not long before my friend Frank Kimbrough, you know Frank
oh
Kimbrough,
man, I love that guy. Woo.
and Frank was he was very close with Paul, and he idolized Paul, you know. And you can hear when he played, you could always hear some Paul in there, you know. And they were buddies. So, he, right, not long before he passed away, he said, "Go to this link and watch this interview with Paul Bley." So I went there, and it was at New England Conservatory in maybe 1981 or whatever year it was. And one of the students, he was like leaning on a piano, and one of the students said, "So, Paul, when you do a record, like, do you prepare?" You know, he just asked, "When you're going to do a record, do you prepare?" And Paul said something to the effect, he goes, "Well, it depends on, you know, I do some recordings for ECM. Those we do a little rehearsal maybe, but I know the players and they come in." He goes, "But, you know, like tomorrow, I'm doing a session with Adam Nussbaum. He plays with the Brecker brothers. He's kind of a rock drummer. And the bass player I never heard of. I have no idea who he is, you know. But I'll play and I'll give my money and I'll leave, you know." And that was me. You know,
Wow.
like 20 years later, I'm looking at this thinking, "Oh man, I don't feel so good about myself right now." But then I realized he asked me to do 5 more records or 4 more, whatever it was. So evidently it was fine, you know. But it was just funny hearing him talk about something that, you know, I was that guy, you know, and very quickly. So when we did the first record, I was, you know, I was excited and a little intimidated, you know, but he was nice, you know, he was respectful. Okay, this is going to be nice. So finally, after socializing for a minute, then Nils said, "Okay, let's record," you know. And we weren't separated in different rooms. I was kind of standing right next to Paul, and I guess Nussbaum was playing drums, and it was just quiet. And Nils said, "Okay, let's do something," you know. So Nils sat there with his head down, or Paul sat there with his head down. And Ron McClure told me he did the same thing to him. He went 1, 2, 3, F, you know. You just counted off the tune, and on the last beat, he said the key, you know. So I played an F, and then it turned out being like one of those Ornette tunes that I was like, okay, you know, we're cool. But he was kind of like that. And then the other thing he did, we did a record with Rich Perry and I think Victor Lewis. And Rich, too, you know, he was terrified too, you know. So the first tune, Paul kind of had a huddle with the 4 of us, and he said, "Listen, guys, first thing we want to do is kill about a half hour." It wasn't about height arch or anything else. It was about filling the time, you know. Excuse me. So he said, "Rich, you start off by yourself, and you'll play like 10 minutes. And then I'll come in, and then Jay, you come in, and Victor, you come in, and by that time it'll be about 15. We'll play 15 minutes together, and we'll be done. And then the record will be halfway done." So we did that, and it actually sounded good. And I think they edited it maybe into 2 different tunes. But this is my last Paul story. But Paul said to me, "Do you know, you don't know what love is?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he goes, "Well, Rich, let's rehearse the melody." So I was eating a sandwich in like the kind of green room or whatever, and they're playing them, they're rehearsing it, and I'm listening. I'm going, okay, that's the tune as they're playing the changes that I would have played, you know. So Paul says, "Okay, let's do this." So we get in position, and now I am in a booth. This is a different recording session, and Paul just starts kind of playing C something vibe. and he looks over at me, so I came in, and then Rich came in, and then we kind of went to F minor vibe, and then back to C minor, and we kind of went back and forth, and then we were done, and we really never played "You Don't Know What Love Is."
Oh wow, okay.
And then he called it on the record. I think it's called "This Is Love." You know, so just a trippy guy, man. You know, just a real innovator, and he was nice to me, and I feel completely honored to play with him, and really appreciate Nels introducing us.
Yeah, sure. Did you guys ever play gigs with Paul, or were just
never played
sessions?
a gig?
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting.
We were, yeah, you know, I think, and Jeff Hirshfield was on, who's another old friend. He played on Notes on Ornette.
Yeah, I love that record.
Which
that's a beautiful.
Is a great. I mean, not because I'm on it, but it's just a great. You know, I think most of the records I did, I feel proud to be part of. But then there are a few that where really the stars were aligned in special things, and that's one of the ones that felt that way to me. And so Jeff and I were talking. We was like, man, we should try to get, you know, tell Paul we'd like to work with him, you know. And he was nice. And we said, man, Paul, we should do some gigs. And he said, well, get one and I'll play with you, you know. So he really didn't have a huge interest in getting gigs and stuff. Yeah. Was my impression. Now I'm sure he had a manager that got him gigs and all that. But yeah, so never played live with him. But I did run into him with Kimbrough actually at a bar in Canada, and he was there, and he, you know, he knew Frank very well, but he remembered me and everything. So that made me feel nice, you know.
Yeah. Now, Notes on Ornette, I really love that record. That's such a cool record. It's really,
yeah, it really is.
He really excels.
So there's a tune on there. There's a tune on there called Crossroads, and I don't know if you know that one. I think he recorded it on the record called Closer, whatever that record is. Yeah. And it's on there, and he also recorded it with Ornette on what was that live gig in LA they did very early on, and I'll remember it, but it's on that record, and you know, the melody takes about 3 seconds. It's just and then you go, and you know, he wouldn't rehearse, so he said, let's play this, and he played it one time. Okay, let's do it. And I said, Paul, wait, just play it one more time, you know, because I just wanted to get the bass motion, you know. And he kind of looked at me and laughed and said, okay, you know, like normally I wouldn't do this, you know, but I'll throw you a bone and play it again for you, you know. So he was just that kind of guy, you know.
Funny.
He liked the mistakes and the roughness and the uncertainty.
But that's the beauty of it, right? If you listen even to the early Ornette stuff, or you know, the quartet Ornette or early Paul Bley stuff, they're like kind of mistakes. You know, it's like music, but it feels so organic. Therefore,
and that's part of the beauty of it. You know.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Not too polished, and but Jay, I wanted to ask you this. You know, speaking of Ornette, like. And you coming from California, right?
Yes.
Who were your like initial jazz heroes that got you excited for jazz? I mean, I guess Ornette was maybe one of them, or I don't know actually. Like, but early mid-70s, I guess. Like, what happened?
Well, actually, I was too kind of naive to be ready for Ornette, you know. So in my world, I became aware of Ray Brown and Mingus. And there wasn't a lot of jazz where I was from. Of course, California has its own jazz history. It's quite rich, but I wasn't really part of that. I was too young. But I was into, like I said, Ray Brown, Ron Carter, Charlie Hayden, and really Ray and Mingus were the first two guys that really got me excited about playing jazz music. And I played jazz with my friends in California, and and I graduated from college, and literally the next week, Woody Herman's band called me, and I actually like Woody Herman's band, you know. So I said, "Man, I'm down." And so I went on the road with Woody's band right out of college, and that was kind of the end of my California thing, you know. So I graduated. It was 22 or 23. Then I just was on the road, you know, and you know, on Woody's band at that time was Joe Lovano and Gary Smulyan and Frank Tiberi, of course, and Jim Powell, great trumpet player, and John Riley was the drummer. And I'm still very close with John Riley today. You know, we still play together. We play with Rich Perry, and we used to play with Bob Mintzer together. And he's, of course, played with the Vanguard Orchestra for the last many, many years. And I used to do that when Mel was still alive. And then I kind of stopped doing it just because I was doing other stuff. And then John asked me to come back to sub for David Wong, you know, like maybe the last 2 years before COVID. And I did it, and it's great. But it's just, there's a lot of pressure because you just show up, and everybody else does the gig every Monday, and they've been doing it for 40 years, you know, so they don't really care. I mean, they do care, but, you know, you're kind of on your own. You got to get the music. There's no room. It's dark, you know. So I enjoyed doing it again, and John still calls me to do it, and I've never been available, but I look forward to doing that again at some point.
Yeah. How was that initial experience when playing with Woody and traveling around? I mean, like, did you imagine it like it would be?
It was great.
Like when you got the gig, you know, when you got the first big major gig?
Not really. I had I had a much more romantic thing in my head. You know, I basically, you know, I'm from California, as you mentioned, and I flew to Syracuse, New York, and I had my acoustic bass and my electric bass, which I stopped playing 30 years ago. But I had all my stuff, and you don't know if you're going for 3 days or 5 years, you know. They could have sent me home the next day. Fortunately, they didn't, and I did it for a year.
Wow.
Never went home, and I sat on a tour bus, and, you know, it's hard work, man. You're on the bus every day, hanging with a bunch of maniacs, you know, and we would do dances, we'd do concerts, and it was a great learning experience for me, because I didn't necessarily have that growing up. So, you know, in a year, it was trial by fire real fast, you know. And then we ended up kind of near where I'm from. And I said, you know what, maybe this is a time for me to bail, you know. So I gave Woody my notice, and he was cool. And I ended up in Southern California again. And then maybe a month later, I got called from Carmen McRae.
Oh, wow.
You know, so I did that gig for 2 years.
Wow.
And I'm giving you the you know, the brief first 5 years history. And then I was in New York a lot, you know, with her. And I would sleep on people's sofas, you know. For some reason, New York was the one place where she wouldn't get us a hotel room. You know, we were kind of on our own, you know. And so that's where I met Jeff Hirshfield and pianist Gary Dial, and just a lot of musicians, you know. And then Gary Dial said, you know, I play with this band with Red Rodney and Ira Sullivan. Would you like to do that, you know? And I did it for maybe a year or two while I still lived in California. And then I realized, man, this is my opportunity to move to New York, you know. So
when did you move?
Seized the opportunity. 82.
82, okay.
Wow. 1982, yeah. And also, in California, I was playing with Toshiko Akiyoshi.
Yeah. Wow, okay.
And she had a big band and a trio. And her husband, Lou Tabakin, played shit, you know, that was his big band also. And he had a trio. So I was playing in her trio, and his trio. And then they moved to New York. And Joey Barron was the drummer. And Joey had just moved to New York. So when I moved to New York, I had 4 gigs really.
Yes,
I had Toshiko's trio, Lou's trio, their big band, and Red Rodney and Ira Sullivan. So, which is, I'm so lucky, man. You know, because it doesn't really operate that way these days.
Yeah.
You know, I have all these talented students, and they're like, "Well, how am I going to get a gig? How is my career going to start?" And I really don't know what to tell them. All I tell them is it's going to be very different from how it was for me. I was just lucky and in the right place, and my phone rang. It's not like that anymore. You know, I think people have to be much more proactive, and that's great. And I think it leads to a lot of creative music making from these people. But you know, I even though I did go to college and graduate from college, I like to I studied classical music. You know, I didn't study jazz. I learned quote unquote jazz just from playing with people and getting yelled at on the bandstand. You know, so it's not like that really anymore. So
yeah, no, it's different. Like when you were in New York, who were the first, like, beside these people, like, who were the first New York connections you made actually with people who were from New York? I mean,
let's see. Well, I played a lot with Jeff Hirshfield, drummer. Yeah. He lived in a building at 34th Street and 10th Avenue. And he lived there, and a drummer named Tom Whaley lived there, and it was just filled with musicians. And so I met all those people. It was kind of like a mini loft scene, but it was in a kind of a rundown old building, you know. So I met just people playing sessions at people's apartments, pretty much. And that was a good time to do that. So I wasn't really part of any jazz education scene. You know, nowadays I have all these great students that come from Australia or you know, where Europe or somewhere, anywhere in the States, and you know, going to the Manhattan School of Music where I teach, and also at Jersey City University I teach, but they come there really to get to New York. You know, I think that's their main criteria. And then of course they want to learn something too, you know, but I think it's the entree into the New York scene that really is the main motivator.
Sure. Yeah, it's way different, nowadays. I wanted to ask you about how you met Michael Brecker, and playing with Mike. How was that like? You know, I love those records you did with him. You know, he's one of my favorite musicians ever, and like, you know, how was your connection with him?
Well, it was funny, you know. I mean, I can tell you how I started playing with this band, but first I'll tell you. You asked where I met him. I met him when I was with Carmen McRae, and they were having it was the next version of the Newport Jazz Festival. It was called the Cool Jazz Festival, and bands would travel around together and do these cool jazz festivals in Detroit and LA and wherever, you know, Europe. So we were traveling a lot with the Brecker brothers.
Okay.
And you know, just traveling. We were playing with them. You know, it was me, Carmen, and my friend Steve Laspina was playing with Mary Portland, and you know, it was just like busloads and plane loads of musicians going to these festivals. And so Michael was in the heat of the Brecker brothers. You know, this is like 79 or 80 maybe, and he liked our rhythm section. And so he said, man, when I go to play in Nice with the Brecker brothers, you guys are going to be there, obviously, right? Yes, we are. Would you guys like to play a set with me? You know, just playing straight ahead jazz.
Okay. Wow.
And we were like, well, we'll have to think about that. No. So of course we were like, oh, of course, man, definitely. And so we got to Nice, and then at the last minute they put Richie Cole on the bill with us, which was fine, but it made it something different,
Sure.
But then when I'd run into him, like at Bradley's or something, he'd be standing in the back, and I'd say, hi, Mike. And he actually remembered me and us and was super nice, And so now you fast forward many years later, and he had his own band with Nussbaum and Joey Calderazzo and Mike Stern. And Jeff Andrews was playing electric bass. And I think he wanted to pare it down to more of an acoustic jazz quartet with acoustic bass and no guitar. And so he had auditions, and nicely Nussbaum recommended me. And we went and played at his house, and we just played some tunes, and he had a couple of tunes, as I recall, that we played through. And of course I knew the tunes because it was from his first record.
Yeah.
I think it was just called Michael Brecker, Matheny, and Charlie Hayden and all that, And so I knew most of those tunes, and so he asked me if I'd play with the band. So I did for like a couple years. And then like the second year, he was getting calls from Paul Simon and other people supported this theory, but it seemed like with Mike, whatever he was doing, if he was playing acoustic jazz, he kind of missed the funk or the more electric stuff. And if he was doing that, he wanted to play acoustic jazz, or missed it, So I think Paul Simon called him and probably made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Sure.
And so that was the end of our band,
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it was really fun, man. And that's a good example of, I had that first record and I memorized all the music. And it wasn't, it was fairly easy music. It wasn't a huge feat, pretty simple to do. But we played in Warsaw. In Poland, our first concert, and we did a couple rehearsals up at his house, but I had all the music memorized, So when we played in Warsaw, we were playing, and Michael kind of turned around. He's like, he was impressed I wasn't using any music, and I think that was a good, it set me on a good path with him. And Nussbaum and I had played a lot together, and I loved playing with Joey, and so it was really fun, man. It was another amazing experience.
Yeah. No, I love those records. I mean, I love anything he did. Like even later, it's such a sound. He played two notes, and I was like, man, it transcribes.
And everybody that played with him said what a great guy he was. I was kind of intimidated by him, not because he wasn't nice, just because he was who he was. So I wish. Oh man, I wish I knew him now, or we could get to spend time playing music and hanging now. I think I'd be much more comfortable. But the music itself was really a pleasure, and it was good music. I dug the direction of the music.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you also about the same time when you played with Michael, you started making your records as a band leader, right? And
that's true. Yeah.
Next Exit, I think it was like around that time, and I remember I have that record, and I got it because of Wayne Krantz initially.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
And I love the music and the tunes.
Yeah.
And how did you decide to do that record? How did this to become a band leader, and how did you actually assemble that band? I mean, I know you said Jeff Hirshfield, you played with him for a long time, but it's a beautiful group.
Oh, thank you. It's funny how all these things happen. I feel like everybody has a story to tell. Yourself included. But to answer your question, I was doing other records for that label, which was called DMP, Digital digital music products, and I played with my friend Gary Dial and Dick Oates. They did some records. I played on their records, and Warren Bernhardt, piano player, asked me to do his records. So I got to know the label. Well, they got to know me, right? And so one day I just said to him, "Hey, could I do a record?" And I really didn't even have anything prepared, you know. And he, Tom Jung was his name, is his name, and he said sure. And I had some tunes kind of ready, and so we did it. And it you know, Randy Brecker, Jeff, and my childhood friend David Witham played keyboards. He played. There was no piano on it, but he played some keyboards on there. And Billy Drews played saxophone. And you know, Billy's still a good friend. You know, he plays with the Vanguard Band, and we've done other gigs together. And I'm just a huge fan of him. So anyway, that we did another record with Toots Thielemans. Yeah. And Tim Hagans played trumpet, and Billy Drews, and and Witham played keyboards on that too. Yeah. So, and you know, I have to say, and I did another record for Steeplechase maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. And you know, being a band leader is not something I really aspire
interesting.
to.
Okay.
And that it's my own thing. I just feel like I'm so busy playing other people's music, and the music is always really good. And I think, man, you know, there's no way I'm gonna make any contribution as a composer at that level. And of course, that's a stupid thing to feel. All you have to do is get in there and try, you know. But my focus has been more on being a side person than a band leader, even though I'm proud of the records I did do, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I love the tunes you wrote, the Third Rail and what's Next Exit, Inside Line, all those tunes that you wrote on the first record. It's beautiful melodies, and I wanted to ask you that how come you didn't do more? I mean, I thought the answer was going to be that you being a sideman, that you're so busy. But you know, I love your stuff as a band leader.
Well, I mean, look, I have plenty of time that I could work on being a leader and doing records, but yeah, I don't know. It kind of fell off my radar, you know. And I have plenty of opportunities. Nils Winter asked me to do that more recent record, and I said, I don't really have music ready. I don't know that I want to do that, you know. And I said, well, we were at a bar having a beer, and I said, well, and I was going to do another record for him the next day. And I said, well, let me think about it, and I'll see you tomorrow, you know. And I'm lucky to have a studio at my home, you know.
Okay.
It's not, it's not like Avatar, but it's, you know, I can record a group of people and really enjoy that. And I just asked Nils, or basically said, if I can do it at my pad and do it the way I want to do it. And he said, sure. So I basically presented him with that record, and I mixed it and mastered it, and pretty much gave it to him. I think he kind of remastered it, but to his liking. But yeah, so
we're talking about the Deepscape, right?
Too. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And Billy Drews is on that too.
Yeah.
You know, and Kirk, Knuffke,
and Matt Wilson, right?
Matt Wilson, Matt Wilson, and my dear friend Rogerio Boccato played some percussion, and Frank Kimbrough. You know, I don't have a piano there, and Frank's wife Marianne had bought a harmonium, and Frank and I did a record where he brought that, you know, with a guy named Ryan Truesdell. We were doing the music of Gil Evans, and Frank brought the harmonium in, and I loved the sound of it, you know. And I said, man, we have to, if I do a record, we're going to record with that, you know. And it's not easy to play because you got to pump it, you know. So one of your hands is pumping, so you can only really play with one hand, and it makes a lot of racket. You can hear clacking sounds, and I had only played with Allen. You know Allen Ginsberg?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He's a.
I studied poetry. I studied American poetry, so
okay, yeah.
I'm quite.
So I did a gig with him.
Really?
And he played that, and wow. I loved the sound of it, you know. So.
Wow. How did you end up on a gig of Ginsberg?
That was really weird. I was playing with Toshiko Akiyoshi and Bob Moses.
Oh yeah.
In Texas, at a place called Caravan of Dreams, and it was a venue that had it had about 2 or 3 venues in it. So our host said, "Oh, you want to meet Allen Ginsberg?" And I said, "Sure." Who's Allen Ginsberg? You know, I had no idea who he was, and of course I couldn't Google him because this was before all that. You know, but he was very nice, and he said, "What do you play?" I said, "He goes, you want to play with me tonight?" And I said, "Sure." "What are we going to play?" He goes, "I don't know. You know, I'm going to do my poetry, and you're just going to play." I said, "Solid." You know, so
wow. I
walked by his dressing room, and there was like a plume of smoke coming out of his dressing room, you know, and but he was cool, and we played Howl, you know, probably his most famous poem, and I just kind of tagged along, but it was super fun, you know, and he was really nice too, you know.
But it was you, Alan, and Bob Moses?
No, just me and Alan.
Just you and Alan. Okay.
Because I did my concert with Toshiko.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
He didn't want the drums and everything, so he just said, "You want to play with me?" And I said, "Sure." You know.
Quite cool. Wow. Yeah.
And then I ran into him a few times in the village. I'd be walking around, and there was Alan, and I'd say hi and say, "I don't know if you remember, but I played with you at Caravan of Dreams." "Oh yeah, that was fun." You know, I've been lucky to play with a lot of really nice human beings, man. You know.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I wanted to ask you also about, you know, speaking of the musicians you played with, we mentioned them already, Vic Juris, and you know, like you said, you guys done like, I don't know, 15 records together. Like, what was your story with Vic? Like, how did you guys hook up and playing with him? I mean,
you asked earlier, you know, like what was like my playing scene in New York when I first got here. Vic is one of the. We just ended up on some gigs together, and you know, his playing was kind of superhuman. You know, I mean, I remember being into him with my friends, sitting and listening to Vic Juris records. Like they had to have been his first records. I forget what label that. Maybe on Muse, or something. Yeah. And we'd listen and like, man, listen to this guy. Sounds like Pat Martino. You know, we were, you know, I think Vic would admit that his earliest influence was Pat Martino, probably. But then, you know, over the years, he was like a sponge, man. You know, all the great guitarists, of which, if you ask, I'm pretty sure. Schofield or Abercrombie, God bless them, you know, they were all huge Vic fans, you know, and so we just connected, and then he just started asking me to do gigs, you know, and we had a really nice trio with Adam Nussbaum. We played the first Sunday of every month at the 55 bar.
Really?
For years, for maybe 10 or 12 years, something like that. And started kind of building up a following, you know, and playing whatever. You know, Vic had originals. We never rehearsed. He would, we'd show up to the 55 bar. I don't know why this always resonates with me, but Vic had like amazing hand-eye coordination, and he could. One time there was a basketball court, and Vic was smoking a cigarette and throwing baskets. You know, he made like 20 free throws in a row while smoking a cigarette and not even caring. You know. So anyway, we'd go to the 55 bar, and Vic had this thing where he could take the music and fling it like 10 feet, and it would land on my music stand perfectly. You know, he knew like the aerodynamics of a piece of paper, you know, and he'd just go boom, and then we'd play it. You know, that was our rehearsals at the 55 bar. And yeah, it made so much. And you know, he never stopped studying. You know, he to the end of his life, he was taking lessons with this fellow Charlie Banakis, who's a famous piano player, educator, guru that lived in Boston, and you know, Mike Stern studied with him, and Vic, and I think Jeff Berlin. A lot of people studied with him. So Vic was always trying new stuff, and you know, started using effects and playing free music and playing bebop. You know, it was all good. You know, and I had so much fun playing with him, and he was another amazing, super dry sense of humor. You know, he didn't take any shit from anybody, but he was always a gentleman. You know. But always spoke his mind. So I learned a lot from playing with him, for sure.
Yeah, he's such an underrated guitarist, you know. Like when I speak to students of mine or when I do a workshop, and you know, we talk about guitarists, and I say like, well, you should check out, I don't know, Vic Juris or someone like that. Everyone's like, what? Who? Like, people, are you serious? You know?
Yeah, I know.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how you know, Vic was aware of that, of course, you know, but and he cared, but then it got to the point where, you know, so many people loved him and respected his playing and told him so, and he knew all the lives he had changed by being an amazing teacher. And I just played with Mike Moreno the other day.
Yeah, oh really? Okay.
And he was talking about studying with Vic at the New School, you know, or I think it was at the New School somewhere. And yeah, just really special guy in every way.
Yeah, beautiful. You got to share.
And I still see his wife, Kate Baker. Yeah.
Jay, I also wanted to ask you about your. I didn't know about these records. You know, usually when I go through my record collection, I kind of know on the records that I have you at home, but then I checked, you know, what else you did, and then this popped up, and I wanted to. You probably answered these already, but how did you end up on these pop rock sessions? I saw you played with Zappa and David Bowie, and I mean, it's obviously New York. These things happen, but like, how did these two?
Well, I mean, I did an interview with a friend of mine, and they were totally into the whole Zappa thing. So I've gone into great detail about that, but I'll give you the short version.
Yeah, okay.
The day before I moved to New York, well, this Chad Wackerman is an old friend of mine. He's the drummer with Zappa.
Okay.
And I knew Chad since he was like 6 years old. He was a drum phenomenon as a little boy in our area, you know. So he started playing with Zappa, and he called me. He said, Frank just got the rights to some of his old music back. Would you come to his pad one day and record? And I said, well, sure. I said, my bass is already in New York. So I borrowed a bass from a friend of mine named John Heddle. And I went to Zappa's house like early in the day, like maybe 10 in the morning. And he just wanted me to add bass parts to stuff he had already recorded. I did some where I replaced stuff on old Mothers of Invention tunes, and he had other stuff that was like live recordings, and he wanted me to just add some stuff. You know, a lot of it, most of it free playing. It wasn't like, you know, transcribing hard stuff, thank God. But it was just adding something to these things. It ended up being on 3 different recordings. Thingfish is one, and can't remember the other 2 right now. But So it was one day of recording, but I was there for like 12 or 14 hours, and it was just him and me and the engineer. And
wow, interesting.
And he was, last time I did this, they said, was I intimidated? And I really wasn't, because he was so cool. It wasn't. He was just respectful, and it's like, well, let's try this. Cool, let's try this. Well, maybe you could try it this way. We plowed through probably 20 tunes in in a day, really.
Wow.
And then the next morning I got on a plane and moved to New York, So
that's crazy. Wow.
So that's how I met him. I met David Bowie really through Maria, because he was a fan of Maria.
Oh, really?
And he would come to our gigs.
Okay.
And for years, Maria would say, "Oh, David Bowie was at the gig tonight." Never saw him. He was like a master of like slipping in and slipping out, and there was no entourage or anything. He was just there, and then he wasn't. So he wanted to collaborate with her. He dug her music, and he had written a tune, and he said, "Can you do something with this?" And it's called Sue. It has an additional, like in parentheses, it says something else, but and so we went, and I actually did a couple rehearsals with him, and Mark Juliana played drums. Clarence Penn was in the band, but I think he wasn't around, so Mark played drums, and I don't think Frank came to the rehearsals. I don't remember. Ben Monder was there, and Donnie McCaslin, and Ryan Keberly, the trombone player. Yeah. And so we kind of workshopped this tune. And after a couple of rehearsals, then we went to the power station. It was called Avatar at this time, but we went in there, and I think we did it in an hour, maybe 2 hours. It wasn't. Bowie was totally cool again, and just another nice guy. Maria was very worried about it. She would tell you this, and he said something that Maria and I still joke about to this day. She would say to him, "Well, David, is this cool? I don't know if it's working." And he's like, "Maria, this isn't a plane crash. We all walk away." So he wasn't pressuring her. He dug what was happening, and the producer said to me, we were just going for it, like in the rhythm section, everybody else is playing a part, but if you listen to that tune, the rhythm section is pretty open and free. We're playing a tune, but it goes into an open section, and we were just playing, and I thought for sure the producer, a famous producer, I think his name is Tony Visconti. He was like, "Well, don't worry about it. We can do what we want after the fact. We just want to get a good take." So we got a good take, and I thought for sure when it came out it would be all carved up. And man, he left it exactly as we played it. Oh. Which was really cool, because it was. It wasn't like avant-garde music, but there was some, stretching in there, and then they left it, and it's a very cool cut, and it was, again, really fun, good experience. Yeah. Well, and then I'm just kind of trying to. I played on a Celine Dion record. That was because my buddy was producing the song, and he said, "Hey." And I was in California with somebody else, and my friend was like, "Man, I'm doing this Celine Dion tune. Can you come on your day off?" And so I went in the Hollywood Hills to some guy's house, and we recorded the bass part, and that was that. So I feel like all this stuff I've had the good fortune of making no effort, and stuff kind of falls in my lap, which is, that's not lost on me. I know that I'm very lucky. And I also know, like I said before, I don't think most people who I teach it's not going to be like that for them, because it's a different world. You
Yeah,
know, unfortunately, I don't think the world I mentioned that I feel like I came up. My jazz education was more apprenticeship. It wasn't going to a college, you know, and that was good for me. It's not really like that for the most part now, but I don't think my way is better. You know, I think both, as long as you end up playing good music, man, it doesn't matter how you get there, you know.
yeah.
So.
Nicely put. Yeah, you're probably also the only guy who has overlapping Celine Dion and Paul Bley on his resume.
It's so bizarre, you know. That's why I remember I used to play with Joe Sample.
Really? Oh,
you know,
wow.
Joe's
Yeah, sure.
piano player. I played in his trio for 14 years while doing all this other stuff. And I remember playing with him somewhere in the South and, you know, getting on an airplane and landing at LaGuardia with my bass, because I traveled with my bass in those days, and going straight to one of those Paul Bley records. I forget which one.
Wow.
And I thought, how bizarre is this? You know, like, you know, played with Joe Sample the night before and then Paul Bley the next day. It's like two complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But, you know, for better or worse, I really enjoyed doing all that stuff.
Sure.
You know, so.
It's all music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good music. I mean, in the end, that's also what counts, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Yeah. Jay, not to take more of your time, I just wanted to ask you what's on 2023 for you, the schedule, some new records, I mean, that you're playing as a sideman or tours or.
Well, I don't know what other people you talk to say, but I feel like things are, you know, COVID took a toll on everybody, you know.
Yeah.
For you, your family, me, my family, everybody in the world, you know. So I feel like things are kind of starting to get back to normal a little bit. So, I still, as you know, play with Maria. So that's the one gig that I do with any regularity. That still, there's a lot of stuff on the horizon. Sadly, two of the, you know, you mentioned Vic, I mentioned Vic too, Vic and Kimbrough.
Yeah.
They both passed away, you know, during COVID. Not because of COVID, oddly enough. Neither one of them got COVID. So, but so they're no longer with us, you know. So, I mean, I have stuff on my calendar, but I would going to Europe. I think it's in October, but no. And I teach at these two schools, so that has gone on constantly.
Yeah.
And have a lot of gigs, more gigs in New York, at Smalls and Mesro.
Oh yeah, beautiful. That's cool.
And a lot of those, and a lot of the clubs that I used to play at all the time no longer exist. You know, played at the 55 bar all the time.
That's the
Jazz Standard.
That's a big loss. Yeah.
Place called the Katana. Yeah, so those places have folded, which is sad, but you know, it is what it is, you know. So all of my friends and hopefully you, whatever, we forge ahead, and I still feel really lucky to play good music. And if it's music I don't want to play, I don't take the gig, you know. At this point, I'd rather not work than do something that I don't feel great about. So, trying to, and you know, I play a lot with Gary Versace.
Oh yeah,
Gary.
Sure.
We play when Frank passed away. He started playing piano with Maria, and we have a very close musical relationship too. So we do a lot of different things together. Done a couple of his records that I'm very proud of. Beautiful.
He's a great player.
Open, nice, rooted kind of music. So, and I just did a record at my studio with two. You probably know Kenny Wessel.
Yeah. Oh man,
Kenny
really?
Wessel.
You did a record with
Yeah.
him?
So.
Oh man.
Yeah. So we just did a record up at my studio with an incredible saxophone player named Mark Momas.
Oh yeah, sure. I know. Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so we were doing some stuff, and I said, man, we should, if you want to record, we can, because we can do it up at my house. And so they came up a couple times, and we made a beautiful record, and we're just kind of deciding what we're going to do. A couple people have offered to put it out, but we're thinking maybe we'll just do it ourselves. Because I don't know what it's like for you, but I've had a couple bad experiences during COVID with record labels and promotional people.
Yeah.
I won't name names.
Sure,
but,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Where it's like, to spend thousands of dollars for these people to do nothing. It's like, man, we'll just do it ourselves.
Yeah. It's easier
because
nowadays.
I feel, and I'll let you go, but I think why does one make a CD, right? For both, or a recording. I wouldn't even say a CD at this point, but and it's not the money, obviously. I think for pretty much everybody except a very select few.
Yeah.
It's to document your music and your musical relationships. So that's how I feel about it. Some people probably disagree, but yeah. So that's something I'm really excited about, because it's very organic, nice. And Kenny used to play with Ornette.
Ornette, yeah.
There's all of his Ornette stories with me, and
So. Is it just a trio, like saxophone, bass, and guitar? No drums.
Yeah, there's no drums.
Beautiful. Okay.
And it's there's some free playing stuff, but we're playing their tunes.
Wow.
None of my music, but their original music, and it really works well together. And they work together at Mark is involved in this thing called the New York Jazz Workshop. And it's kind of a private school, and Kenny teaches there, and I've gone in and done workshops and stuff and been a guest. So it just seemed like, man, we got to do this,
Fantastic.
So,
well, looking forward. Let me know if
Mark did a really nice record also with Gary. I'm sorry?
No, let me know when you put this one out. Send me an email. I'd love to check it out.
Oh, for sure. I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Please, yeah.
I'll send it to you.
Mark did the record with Gary, you said, or?
Yeah, we did a record for Sunnyside, and it's music inspired by Fauré, the classical composer. And so Mark wrote a bunch of tunes with that as his inspiration, and that ended up being a really great project too.
Wow.
So, and that's with Gary Versace and Nate Radley.
Yeah, I love Nate. Yeah, he's amazing.
I'm sure you know Nate.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. I love Nate.
Yeah, he's great.
Beautiful. Super, man. So nice stuff coming up.
And the music is beautiful. It's really,
yeah. Beautiful. Cool.
So life goes on.
Life goes on. Jay, if you're in Europe in October, near Austria or something, or near Slovenia, drop me a line. Let's get together for a beer or something. Or...
Yeah, I'm gonna be in Czech Republic.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And thank you for showing an interest in getting together, and
thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
And thanks for what you do for the music.
Thanks. My pleasure. And
I'd love to share a beer with you.
Yes. Cool.